Okay, so we have Bonnie Yates with us. She is a special education attorney with a law firm of Tollner Law Offices, and we just adore the ground that she walks on. She's an amazing person, an amazing woman, amazing attorney. I know she's like, stop already, but it's all true, an amazing mom. So Bonnie, welcome back to Autism Live.
Oops, I guess that's my cue to talk. Sorry about that.
Well, I just
What I
want
was actually thinking about was, I think it's harder to be a mom than any of those other jobs I've had, and I know dads and moms now are really learning, exactly how strong they are because they're doing things that they thought if you told anybody we'd be doing these things, they'd be like, what? So we had a bunch of questions that came in
and a new one today.
Them. And then I've got backup information, including sexuality, predetermination, and prior written notice.
Ooh.
We can do a lot of stuff. And I'm supposed to have said that I work for Tollner Law Offices. We're an 8-attorney firm in San Jose. You can find us on the web. If you want a free consultation and you're in California, Arizona, or Nevada, we can do that for you. If you're in any of the other 50 states, I recommend that you have a specific conversation with a specific attorney about your specific problem. What we're doing here is trying to educate you on your legal rights under the IDEA, but it's not always a substitute for actually a really focused conversation in which we would actually look at documents also. The documents are a big deal. So just know that when we're answering questions, oftentimes it's with abbreviated facts, not knowing what state you're in, not knowing what age your child is. So I guess to that end, when you do write questions in and it's relevant, if you can tell us those things, it might help us give you a little better answer. So now I'm going to read the questions.
Okay. And we had one that just came in that I want to try to get to as well.
Well, you're the boss.
Has your name written all over
it.
Okay, so the first one, thank you for all you do. This is such a, and this, they said specifically, this is for Bonnie, and they said, thank you for all you do. This is such a great resource. I have a question about OT. Normally, my son has a pullout for OT. He goes into a room full of equipment, and he has the opportunity to do big muscle things. This is for his sensory regulation. For 2 years, they have been telling me he has to have this pullout, and it has to be to work the big muscles. I wanted a push in. Nope, they won't. That won't get it done. He won't be able to focus. Now we are doing school at home, and suddenly they want to tell me he doesn't need it. Based on what? COVID, I guess. The OT person comes on the screen and she has him do handwriting. And really, it's me doing it with him. I said, what happened to all the big movements? And they don't have an answer.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about whether you could stay put prior services during COVID, and the cases have been going in not a consistent direction. Some yes, some no. Did it specify in your IEP anywhere? I wonder that this was like, for gross motor, it was supposed to be clinically based. It was supposed to be push. It was not supposed to be push in. It was supposed to be for large muscle groups. It would be interesting to know if any of that would work. If any of that was in your IEP, so it's really clear what the service is, you might be able to do a motion for stay put and get them to implement the IEP as it's supposed to be implemented. I'm wondering if they're going to say there's no way they can do the clinical occupational therapy, because I think this person said she's in California. If that's the case, the Norris case, which I circulated a few weeks ago, said if it's necessary to provide FAPE and the district can't do it with its own staff, that's what non-public agencies are for. So they could certainly pay for clinical occupational therapy from a non-public provider if they don't have the ability to do it, in-house on their own. It probably behooves you to write them a letter and tell them that you were consulting with an attorney, and the attorney didn't seem to have the same view as the school district did about why the change in the OT service delivery was permissible, even though that's not what he was getting before, and tell them that you would like to have an IEP meeting with them and you hope you can work it out. Now, if you can't work it out, you've got more than one option, and maybe we could talk about that in a separate show, but specifically, your options would be file for due process and move for stay put, or you could do a complaint to the California Department of Education saying that they aren't implementing your child's IEP properly, and CDE will get involved, and if they find things are wrong, they will order corrective action. And I do want to say that I feel like one of the bright spots in the last few months is that CDE has been staying on top of districts. I've involved them over issues of IEEs, of district refusing to hold an IEP, even though the assessments had been conducted. That was back in April. And so districts don't like compliance complaints. They don't like the state coming down and sort of poking around in their business. So that might be the most cost-effective way for you to do it. You could also do what's called a uniform complaint, which just goes to the superintendent of your school. I just think those tend to be unproductive. Usually, a lot of the time, it just ends up being a rubber stamp of what was done below. But those are some options for you. And I don't think, as Shannon said, there hasn't been any showing that that there was a reason, a clinical reason why the services changed. We understand that the services have changed because the district doesn't know how to deliver them anymore, but that's not adequate.
Yeah. I guess, I'm with you on what is in the IEP because even for OT, they have, goals that your child has. And if there are goals in there about those big muscle, things, then that's, like you said, Bonnie, I mean, that's where you start and stop. I'm just wondering, so you have an
Yeah, that's a
IEP.
very good point, and one that I didn't think of, which is why it's nice to have you as my backup.
You taught me well. I learn at the feet of the master. But here's my question for you though that I don't know that I know the answer to. So you have your IEP and you have your goals, and if they haven't X those goals out at the end of the year, you start the year with those goals until you do a new IEP,
Well,
right?
then they haven't offered FAPE in that area. If you don't meet the goals, then they haven't offered FAPE.
So there we are, because it seems like that's the easiest path to pull out your IEP and go, why in OT we have these 3 goals and I haven't seen the person work on that. And maybe they should be videotaping it to say, it's been 3 weeks and never once has she worked on this big muscle group. I don't know. You're the lawyer. Tell me.
Well, we just don't know what the IEP says, what the goals say, what the baselines were, whether
Yeah.
the child is regressed during COVID and comp ed is owed, but we sort of presume that it is. So,
But I guess my question is, they can't just decide without an IEP to implement new goals or different goals that were in the IEP just because summer happened, correct?
well, the distance learning plan is the way they implement the IEP during school closure. But that to me doesn't mean different goals or a different service. Certainly, if it were to have been a different service, like, oh, okay, the best we can do now is fine motor. If you change that without an IEP, it's a change of placement without parental notice or participation. So I don't think they're right about it. My feeling about it is just, hey, they're trying to see whether it'll fly or not.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So pull out your IEP, take a look, and then if you want to, write us back. Next question. I asked my school for a distance learning plan, like you suggested. They said the plan is for everyone to have distance learning. I said I need something for the IEP, and they said they're still doing the IEP. They acted like I'm crazy. What are the words that I need to say? And I've heard this from more than one parent, Bonnie, that the school is like, the distance learning plan is we're going distance learning. They don't know what it means. What do we
What
say
I
to
would
them?
have to ask her first is what are they doing now, and how does it compare to what your student had prior to school closure? Are they implementing the IEP to the best of their ability? The law in California says they have to have an emergency plan, and they do need to reduce it to writing. So again, I feel like districts, okay, first of all, I just want to say to everybody, the districts are really busy. Like, the attorneys are being really slow to get back to us, and they're even coming way close to blowing timelines on 30-day IEP requests. So if you're experiencing that, it's not in your imagination. And so I think their problem is they're probably having to do some kind of IEP for every kid, where before they were only doing them manually. So they're definitely backed up. Um, and I think you need to have a discussion with them and tell them that you understand that the distance learning plan is the way they're implementing FAPE, but you have concerns about the way they're implementing it, and you have some other ideas and suggestions, and you want to have a meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
if at the bare minimum, they need to send you the distance learning plan. You know,
Oh, they're acting like they don't even, a lot of
S-
these schools, Bonnie, are acting like they don't even know what that is.
yeah, well, guess what? That's not true. They do know.
Okay. All right.
SB 820 specifically references that anytime there's a closure of school for more than 10 days, at the next IEP, the district has to develop an emergency plan. So that's California laws, SB 820.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes you just hear stuff and you sort of scratch your head. I had a question this morning from an advocate who told her that prior written notice wasn't a part of the law anymore. I was just like, well, here's the law. I don't see any changes. I mean, you have to consider the source. And I guess, you really have to consider the source. Like, I learned a long time ago in law school, after you would leave and you would, from an exam, you'd hear everybody talking about what they wrote on the exam. And then you'd get all intimidated and freaked out. And then you'd say to yourself, I can't listen to these people. So, if people are telling you stuff and it doesn't seem right to you, that's probably because it doesn't pass the smell test.
There we go. Okay. I feel so bad for this parent. They say, I am just done with this school nonsense. I want to stop. Can we just throw this year in the rubbish? We were distance learning and I tried it for 4 weeks. Then I asked for an IEP to say it's not working. They told me at the meeting we were going back to in person, so all would be better. We started in person, went 4 days, and one of the kids tested positive. Now we are back to being at home for 2 weeks. He is in second grade, a special ed class, has autism plus. If we just stop and say we will try again next fall, do we lose anything? We'll lose the year, but will we lose the IEP and have to start all over? I don't think there's any benefit for him to be at the school with masks and risking of being infected, and distance isn't working at all.
Well, I guess what I would say to her is, what is your plan C? Is your plan C that you're going to homeschool him? Is your plan C that you're going to find a private school that you think is safe? If you just opt out for a year, then they don't have any obligation to provide you with compensatory education, which they owe you from March to, it sounds like you did, 4 weeks in the fall, and it wasn't very good. And I hope you took really good documentation. So what you need to do is have an IEP with them and tell them that the options that you've been offered are so bad that you're considering, having to resort to self-help measures, but tell them you don't want to do that, but this is what it's going to take if they're going to fix things for you. Now, there's a lot of school district attorneys running around telling people, if the parent removes a child from the local public school and places a child in a private program, they're disenrolled from the district. That is not true. If you are removing your child from public school because the district isn't offering you a free appropriate public education, and you give 10 business days notice and your reasons for the removal, you still have claims against the district. So if your position is, the best I can do is homeschool my student for this school year, you need to give them notice in a way that's going to protect your right to bring claims later. Now, we've talked about this on the show before, but it's worth bringing up again. In California, all you have to do to form a homeschool is to go online to the California Department of Education, fill in a 2-page homeschool affidavit, which is nothing. And once you do that, your home becomes a private school with one student, you're a student. So that's the way you protect your rights. I think that, the big problem for folks is like, what if there are no good options at all?
Well, and I'll be honest with you, Bonnie. I'm hearing from a lot of parents who have kids that are um, greatly affected, and that things are really hard in a regular situation, but
Yes,
with
they are.
COVID, and they're saying to me, "Why can't I just not do any like?" I want my child to be educated, but I send my child mostly to school for them to have a break, for them to socialize, for me to have a break. And since none of that is happening, can't I just and parents who have said to me, "Listen, my kid is not the kid who's ever going to go to college. My kid, they'll say to me, I'm not giving up, but I want to be realistic, and this is just torture. Could we just take a year off?"
Well, yeah,
And I don't know the
I
answer.
just told you how to take a year off. I mean, I just told you could do homeschooling for a year and not.
But what if they don't want to do homeschooling? Can they
Well,
just
what are they gonna do?
play? And
That is
and
homeschooling. There's no specific curriculum they
okay.
have to follow. That's the whole thing about California is if you set up a homeschool in your home, nobody can come in and tell you you're doing it wrong. Now, if you opt out of distance learning and you don't set up the homeschool or communicate to the district what you're doing, they can still report you for truancy
Okay.
for
All right.
not
Well,
doing the
that's
distance
the answer
learning.
then.
I mean, the other thing we've been doing is we've been taking the distance learning plans and actually taking data on them. We did an IEP, which turned out quite successfully after we showed all the problems with the distance learning plan and excuse me, indicated periods of the day that we wanted to opt out from. Sorry, the district agreed to move the ABA provider from Zoom to home. So that that there might be ways to reconfigure the schedule that make it more useful to the parent.
Okay. Well, all of this sort of feeds into the next question that I have. How does the funding for in-home school programs work? I just keep thinking they already have this figured out. The ones that you subscribe to, I think is what they're talking about, that they've already have this figured
Uh-huh.
out. I would switch to a homeschool program if I knew we wouldn't have to pay for it.
Okay, well, the private homeschools like Laurel Springs, you do have to pay for. The advantage to those is that you don't change districts. If you write the district a letter and you say you're not offering me a FAPE, I have no choice, but I got to set up a homeschool in my home, and I'm going to use the Laurel Springs curriculum. You still have claims against the district for the time period when your kid's going to be in homeschool. If instead you put your child in any one of a number of these um, virtual charter schools, I guess we should call them, that have a curriculum, um, you change your district. Now, CDE also there's a California state curriculum. I don't know what else they offer. Like when you join a virtual charter school, they usually give you a little more than just the curriculum. There's some services too. But you can certainly do that. The question is, do you want to disenroll your child from the district, which is what happens if you put them in a virtual charter school? Then the charter school becomes responsible for implementing the IEP. Or do you want to, um, not do that so that you can stay enrolled in your own district and bring claims against them? It's sort of six of one, half a dozen of another. But yes, you can certainly do an online program. The thing I was hearing from a client in August was that CDE for the first time put caps on some of these virtual charter schools, and they were filling up. And so I don't know how easy it's going to even be to find a charter school that can offer a spot at this point, but I haven't looked.
Okay. But I think the main thing is that it sounds like if you pull your child out, you're going to have to pay for the homeschool program. You can always go back and see if you can get the money from the school, but there's no guarantee. Is that
If
what you're
you're going to
saying?
do that, if you are going to do that, I mean, legally, that's true. I mean, if you can't find a free curriculum that you can use, you need to give the district 10 business days notice and tell them
Okay.
why. And then, yes, you can certainly, um, when school reopens, there's going to be a reckoning in terms of, what kids are owed for comp ed. And at that point, you would certainly be able to raise the issue, or even sooner, of why you need this curriculum.
Okay. We're saying hi to Miss Brenda Lee. We're actually saying hi to a bunch of people. I want to go to a question that Missy asked. She's in Glendale, and she says, when is a parent able to request from a school district for their child to go to a private school for kids with autism so that they're able to learn in the way that their brain was designed?
Well, the answer is when the district can't offer them FAPE within the district. I mean, we do private school cases all the time. You've got to get an outside evaluation that looks at the current setting and then looks at the possibilities and makes a recommendation. You need to take that back to the district at an IEP meeting and say, I've just had this qualified outside evaluator look at my child's needs via assessment and also via observation, and she doesn't think the present placement is working. She thinks I need a non-public school. They don't usually like to say the name of it. It makes it hard if it turns out that school isn't available. So they usually say things like, well, it needs to be a special education school with a class size no larger than 13 and teachers trained in multi-sensory reading methods and, OT on staff. And I mean, they can list out all the specifics. When the district is asked that at the IEP meeting and they say no, that's when you have to file for due process. And most people that get private schools or non-public schools are having to go to due process. Not everybody, but a lot of people wouldn't have the services they have if they had sort of quit at the IEP level.
I want to do a shout out because I don't know if she's still with us, but Melissa Schomburg Lander was with us for a few minutes,
Oh, cool.
and she was somebody that you did a shout out for last week and talked about how amazing she is and her service standout advocates, how amazing they are. I think we're both big fans of hers. Just giving a shout out to her.
Yep.
I also want to say somebody wrote in and said, I'm doing play-based therapy. My little girl is 30 months old. She has language, some sort of social skills, but she engages in self-play most of the time. Any tips on improving social behavior? And then we've had several questions about people talking about play therapy. And I don't know where you are on this, Bonnie. I love toys and I love using toys as part of therapy. It's the reason why we have our toy guide that we're going to start revealing next month. And I think that play is a really important way for our kiddos to have a safe place in which to learn important lessons, including social lessons. I do want to caution everybody, though, that at 2.5, that's if your child has an autism spectrum diagnosis, that is a time when you are it's most advantageous for you to start an ABA program. And part of ABA utilizes play. So I just want to put that out there, that there are 0 studies that show that a child has made enough progress from play therapy to lose their diagnosis. There's 0 studies that show that, but there are over 1,000 studies that show that with ABA started at that age, it's entirely possible that roughly 50% of the kids who start ABA at the age of that 30 months will lose their diagnosis if they get good quality ABA therapy and they get the right amount of it. We're not talking about 10 hours a week. We're not talking about 20 hours a week. We're talking about 40 hours a week. So just want to put that out there. Bonnie, do you have anything that you want to say about that? Because I know you have feelings about ABA.
Well, you and I both had a very excellent result with ABA. So, if I had to do it all over again, there might be some things I would tweak, but I mean, I don't really have the expertise to comment about play therapy and say more than you said already. Um, I mean, I'm playing all the time with a 15-month-old little boy, and I teach him everything via play, but he's not having any significant interfering, behaviors. So, I mean,
Yeah. Well, even then at 2.5, our kids are still supposed to be playing side by side. They're not supposed to be interacting, although there are a bunch of things that we can do in play to build social skills. And I would tell you, we talked about skills earlier. I would tell you to look at the joint attention lessons, that if you can at that age be getting a child to look at something, so you look at something and you go, oh, look, it's Mickey Mouse, and they look at Mickey Mouse, and then you both turn back and look at each other and then look back at Mickey Mouse. That's the ground floor of every social skill that happens later on. It's called joint attention, and there are lessons to teach that through play. But at 2.5, you should not be expecting them to do a great deal more than that. But take a look at skills. It age norms all of the different things. All right, Bonnie, we literally only, because I have to still do jargon of the day, so we probably have like 2 more minutes. Is there something that you would like to do with 2 more minutes?
Yeah, I think we could do. Well, I think we could at least start talking about sexuality.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Let's
so
do it.
sexuality is not a topic that is particularly like favored by parents of young children. And so for parents with disabilities, this becomes an even more perplexing topic. I can just tell you without getting into any gory details, disability or not, sexuality is going to become an issue as your child becomes 10, 11, 12. So I think the best way to handle it is to be matter of fact. Now, Regional Center historically has provided some courses on sexuality, but the resource that I was looking at over the weekend talks about it more in terms of being a responsibility of the school district to address in kind of community-based education. So maybe if I read really fast, I
Okay.
can just read this one page, and then the other stuff that we were going to do today, we can do next week.
Okay.
Okay. Comprehensive sexuality education can be integral to the development of students with disabilities, particularly those that are socially isolated during the pandemic. Sexuality education concepts include personal and interpersonal skills such as valuing others, making decisions, communicating, and self-advocacy, said Rachel Schwartz, an education consultant and behaviorist with the Watson Institute in Pittsburgh. But often these skills in the context of sexuality are overlooked. The former special education teacher said that in some cases, educators are not providing information to students at all. In other cases, educators are providing indirect, incomplete, or infrequent information. And that goes back to, we're all animals. This is a biological process, and we have to just be matter of fact about it, in my opinion. Sexuality education may be ineffective when language is not concrete or it is incomplete, said Schwartz, adding that educators tend not to say things as they are. For example, educators may talk about hygiene or touch, but steer away from more uncomfortable conversation. The best thing we can do as special educators is to empower language, she said. Sexuality education is not just about sexual intercourse. Sexuality relates to self-image. Schwartz said that when it comes to sexuality, students with disabilities develop the same as their peers without exceptionality. They still want to have personal connections with other people. Schwartz said that by not integrating sexuality into differentiated instruction, we're really denying students the ability to be included in a community and interacting. By being more deliberate, educators can prevent adults coming into this world without necessary knowledge and being susceptible to sexual assault and sexual abuse, she said. So should I stop there and I can do the rest next week?
Yeah. We had one more question. Thank you, Bonnie. We had one more question come in. Do you know the name of a lawyer in Queens, New York, who represents teenagers for Social Security benefits, or a group I can reach out to?
Yeah, Gary Meyerson, Mayerson. He's in New York City. Call him and get a reference. He should know somebody.
Okay.
Mayerson, or Barbara Ebenstein, who I've mentioned before on the show. Ebenstein. They ought to know.
And if you are in California, Nevada, or Arizona, we want to encourage you to reach out to Bonnie's law firm, Tollner Law Offices. And they said, thank you for that, Bonnie. And talk to them. If you want to get a free consultation, you can. You do have to fill out some paperwork to be able to do that.
It's a very short form. But can I just jump in and say somebody else is posing a really good question that we don't have time to answer on the air now, but we could talk about next week. When is a good time to tell the child they have autism?
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that.
Yeah, that's a really important question. But Bonnie, we thank you so much. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is that you also recommend that if somebody is outside of California, Nevada, or Arizona, to reach out to COPA. Both of us
www.
have this tickle.
Yeah, you got
Sorry.
it from me. COPA is a really good place to start. I think it's a really good organization, and they do have an attorney directory for all the 50 states. So thank you for mentioning that, Shannon.
COPAA.net. I believe .com works as well. But Bonnie, we
I thought it was
so
.org.
I don't. It might be.
I don't know,
But
but I'm just kidding. You know what? I think it's copa.net.
okay. But it
Got that.
might. But see what works. Okay, Bonnie, thank you so much. We're gonna stick around to do jargon of the day, but we really appreciate you being with us and answering these questions.
Okay, well, we'll pick it up next week.
We will. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.